This is the fourth in a short series of presentations to assist paraglider and hang glider pilots who are studying for their BHPA pilot rating exams. This series is on Airlaw. This section looks at aeronautical charts and some aspects of navigation. The online version of the BHPA pilot rating exam features navigation and airmanship as a separate module outside the Airlaw section where it is covered within the paper version of the exam. Navigation, of course, includes how we learn what is out there and where the obstacles to free flight might be. It also includes how we know where we are at any time. Before technology came along, paraglider and hang glider pilots had a laminated map with them to help them navigate the various airspace obstacles. You can only imagine how hard that must have been to use in the air. These charts are still available and generally come in a scale of 1 to 250,000 or 1 to 500,000, 1 to 500,000, and they show airspace below 5,000 feet. All our clever gadgets still use similar symbols and shapes, so it's important that a candidate for the pilot rating spend some time looking at an air map and in particular studying the map legend. You can find a copy of an air map's legend so that you can study it if you search for the NATS air chart symbols online. You can then find examples of the various colour-coded items that appear all over the air maps. You'll get asked various questions about the symbols used on air maps and may have to interpret some. One thing that defines many of the rules set up by the Civil Aviation Authority in relation to use of the air is to take account of the visibility that's available to a pilot. Accordingly, they refer to the concept of visual or instrument meteorological conditions, and the rules that govern aviation in these two different circumstances are known as VFR, Visual Flight Rules, or IFR, Instrument Flight Rules. When it comes to airspace, there is a huge amount of terminology of this type, and each term is generally shortened to an acronym, many of which you should know for the exam. There is a slide within this presentation that is a glossary of the common terms, and the ones that are most likely to appear in the pilot exam are highlighted in this presentation. The Civil Aviation Authority policy on dividing UK airspace is this. Where it has been deemed that an information service should be made available, then this area of sky is known as a Flight Information Region, or FIR. A Flight Information Service and its accompanying alerting service are the basic levels of an air traffic service. These are made available to all aircraft in a Flight Information Region, FIR. The region above 24,500 feet is the Upper Information Region, the Upper Flight Information Region. That acronym is UIR. And as you might spot, the acronym is not quite the same as the words, which are Upper Flight Information Region. You can get caught out. If the CAA has decided that they will provide an air traffic control service to planes operating under instrument flight rules in any area, then that area becomes a control area, CTA, or a control zone, CTR, again. Not a very accurate acronym. If there are parts of the sky where the full air traffic control service is offered to aircraft operating under visual flight rules, then that area is classified airspace, classified as B, C or D class. Note, in describing the dimensions and elevations of airspace, flight levels are designated as a 2 or 3 digit number. For example, flight level 245 is 24,500 feet. You have to remember that a flight level is expressed in units of 100 feet. It's also worth knowing that in GPS terms, the elevation of these flight corridors will move according to the prevailing air pressure. This is because flight levels are pressure altitudes. More of that in a moment. As we have said, there is a lot of terminology and a lot of acronyms. Here are some of the more important ones in respect to the BHPA pilot rating exam. This is a summary explanation of some of the more important terms to learn and to understand. And this is that glossary of abbreviations. It can be found as an appendix in the Skyway code, but I've highlighted the ones that I think are most important to try and memorize for the pilot exam. This is a graphic representation of how UK airspace is subdivided. And it is only this type of airspace where the free flight community are welcome to entertain themselves. And even this part has now more recently been made more simple. In 2014, Class F airspace was abolished, and we now only have access to Class G. The significance of each different airspace class is that each accommodates different amounts and types of traffic. So the rules regarding how far you must be able to see in visual meteorological conditions, VMC, are different in different airspace classes. These rules are known as the Visual Flight Rules Minima. Remember, when a pilot is in visual meteorological conditions, which from our point of view means clear air, then you are piloting your aircraft under Visual Flight Rules, or VFR. The rules in such circumstances are simply that you obey the rules of the air, but in any of the UK you must also respect the Visual Flight Rules Minima set for that class of airspace. In conditions that are not visual meteorological conditions, then you are automatically in the only other mode of flight, and that is instrument meteorological conditions, or IMC. In these circumstances, the pilot must adopt Instrument Flight Rules, or IFR. The Visual Flight Rules Minima for the Class G airspace we use is 1500 meters of flight visibility, clear of cloud and in sight of the surface. However, a hang glider or paraglider pilot might also find themselves in cloud. In these conditions, you are operating under instrument flight rules, and in such circumstances, a rule called the minimum height rule must be applied. This rule states that you must not fly at a height of less than 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle within 5 nautical miles. Final note on aircraft navigation seems to have very little to do with paragliders and hang gliders. However, a nominee for the BHPA pilot rating exam should be aware of something called the quadrantral rule. This rule is intended to reduce collision risk, and it states that if a plane is on a heading from, say, southwest to northeast, or thereabouts, then it would select a cruising level that is an odd number. If the plane is travelling from southeast to northwest, or vice versa, then it would select an even numbered cruising level. The graphic indicates the odds or evens choice for each quadrant of the compass. This rule only applies for planes below the upper flight information region, i.e. below 24,500 feet. It therefore applies to a lot of the general aviation traffic in the UK. So that concludes this brief section on aeronautical charts, a little bit on navigation, VMC and VFR, and IMC and IFR.